Okay, hi there. Professor Terry Hunter here. Most of you probably watching this video already know that, but that's who I am. And what we're going to lecture on today is kind of the first step in a supervisor or manager's educational process, and one of the most critical steps is what is a manager's job? Okay, what managers do? Okay, what are they supposed to be doing? And so a manager's job is to protect the assets of the owners. Okay, normally, if you're a owner manager, then you're protecting your own assets, but you should look at that like you're protecting someone else's assets, even though we're protecting your own assets. To protect the assets of the owners, we're going to talk about what those assets are and how do managers do their job. They make decisions. That's how managers do their jobs. We're going to talk about when you go into management, when you become a manager, you kind of give up honest work forever. You no longer make the materials, you no longer produce the goods, you don't do all the work. Is you make decisions. You have, hopefully, you have employees, which we'll talk about those as assets of the business, and you help them do their job, and you guide the operation, and make decisions. You're the decision maker of the business, okay? And they make decisions based on the long-term best interest of the owner's organization, okay? You make decisions based upon the long-term best interest of the organization. That's your job there. We'll talk about that in a minute, about all the things that come into play with decision making. Let's talk about assets first. When I say a manager's job is to protect the assets of the owners, okay? And what are these assets? Okay, what are the assets of the owners? People, financial, time, energy, product, building and equipment, information and procedures, and the brand of the organization. Okay, so this is what managers do, is they protect all these assets. For instance, people, okay, are assets of the owners of the organization. That's who you work for, ultimately. People. Got two major groups of people associated. There are different types of people that are assets of the organization, but the two basic groups of people in the organization are customers, okay, and employees, are the two big assets of people assets that need to be protected. And so the customers, we say, if I'm a manager and say, oh, my customers, and that's great to have people take ownership of the business. And if you have employees, to have them think like owners and say, oh, my customers. Really, ultimately, they are the owner's customers, is what they are. They belong to the owners. Really and truly, everything in an organization belongs to the owners, whether that's one owner or whether that's shareholders. Okay, you work for the owners. That's what managers do on there. So you taking care of the owner's customers, because taking care of customers results in more revenues and more profits generated by the business, and that's your job on there. Let's talk about employees. Again, we could talk about customers endlessly, but we're just kind of an introduction to what is a manager's job here. Employees are critical. They actually do the work of the organization. And so you protect your employees. You help them succeed in providing the goods and services associated with the organization on here. So employees are critical to an organization. They're absolutely critical, is to take care of them. Again, we could, from a human resources standpoint, we're talking about wages, we're talking about benefits, we're talking about all these things associated with that, but also kind of the care and support that you give your customers. Again, everybody that's watching this video practically understands that we're in the hospitality business here in the courses I'm lecturing for. And this is kind of chapter 1 of every class associated with our business program as we go through. And employees are super critical to the hospitality industry. They're the ones that directly engage with the customers, again, which are incredibly, without the customers, we don't have a business, okay? And without the employees, we don't have customers as we go through. And so to care for the employees, kind of the care and feeding of employees on here, to make sure that they're supported, they have what they need, that we treat them as important people, because they are on there. So again, we could spend a long time talking about how to take care of employees, but the important thing is to understand to take care of the employees. The finances, financial interest is the money associated that in all forms of money, whether it's a cash flow or whether it's a balance sheet or however we look at this money at any particular time. We are responsible as managers for using the financial resources of the company to produce a return on investment to the owners. That's what we do. That's what we do. A lot of times when you ask, there's a lot of managers out there that don't understand what their job is. You would say, what's your job in hospitality business as a manager? Like, oh, customer service, provide good customer service. Well, absolutely provide good customer service, because that protects the customers. That keeps them from going and doing business with someone else. Who it is. You protect them, it's like you just, you want them to keep coming back and return business and spend money and enjoy their products and services of the business. We really want to keep them in bubble wrap if we could, to protect them, to make sure as an asset, without customers, we've got nothing without them, and to understand their importance on there, and have new ways to take care of the customers. So take care of them is protecting them as an asset of the business. So financial, we'll get a return on investment for the owners on there. Owners invest their money, their resources into a business, and they should expect a return on that investment. Okay, so if I make a decision, we'll get to that, we make decisions based on the long-term best interest of the organization, which is the owners of the organization. And so we take care of the money and make sure we spend money and invest their money in something that gets us the best possible return of that money for the business in every decision we make. Time, the most precious of all resources. You hear people all the time say, oh man, there's only so many hours in a day. And there is. There's only so many hours. How do we use that time? Your time, your employees' time, the time associated with the operation. Are we using that effectively, and are we being productive with your time? That's all you got, really, is time to give as a manager. How you use your time. And we use that time to protect the assets of the owners. I know I say that a lot because I mean it on there. How do we invest the energy of the organization? The energy, energies of as far as just, if we're just talking about electricity and water and gas and things like that, the energy of the organization, how do we focus that and use it to be productive? How do we use it to be productive? Okay, we get to the products. Okay, the products. We make a decision about what products to use, how do we produce the products, and we could say products and services associated with that. All this is this going to be productive, and is this going to produce more financial gains for the operation? That's it. That's how we make it, on the basis of what products do we sell, what services do we provide. That's related to the long-term best interest of the organization on here. Okay, buildings and equipment. Okay, buildings and equipment. You would get, how are we using the building Okay, we're not using it for our convenience. We're using it to produce profit for the organization. Okay, and equipment. You know, what equipment do we buy? Okay, simple decision on whether we repair something or replace something. Okay, how much does it cost to replace? How much does it cost to repair? It's not like, wow, it would be nice to have something new. It's like, that's not necessarily a good decision on that. A lot of things are nice, you know, a lot of things involving people and money and time and energy and products and buildings and equipment. A lot of things are nice to do, but is this a good management decision as we go through? Informations and procedures. You know, information, especially proprietary information associated with our organization. And how do we, just general information, how do we use our information, our procedures to produce good products and services associated with our organization on that. Big one at the bottom is brand. Okay, we hear this a lot, the brand. Okay, everything kind of has a brand. Okay, the brand of the organization. What is the general perception of your organization? And you as a manager, okay, how do you enhance that brand? Okay, how do you enhance that brand? How do you manage the brand? How do you protect the brand associated with the organization? Which is how do people and basically everyone, not just customers, but in general, how do people perceive your organization? It's your job to protect that brand and to make sure that as much as possible, people have a perception of your organization that is positive and will lead to increased business. Okay, how do managers make these decisions? Managers make decisions based upon the long-term best interest of the owners. Okay, on here. All these decisions, when you make a decision, okay, you find a lot of people is a manager making a decision saying, what's good for my resume? Okay, here's an example of how we don't do this. Okay, there's nothing on there other than possibly the brand that says that we put you in this position as a manager. The organization hired you as a manager to fluff your resume. That your job is, gosh, should we do this? Should we not do this? Well, which is better for my resume? Well, an organization didn't hire you to make decisions based upon what's good for your resume. The organization hired you to make decisions on what's good for the organization on there. In other words, just make decisions based upon long-term best interests of the organization, and your resume will take care of itself on there. Now that is an awakening to a lot of managers on there. As we go through, you know, it's a filter, just like I say that a lot on decision making. Decisions, this protection of the assets of the owners is something that you can practice, and I'll get to that in a minute. Practicing, if you want to get good at something, practice. That's pretty much the bottom line, is practicing enough and establishing a filter that automatically you run every decision through. And that filter really is, am I protecting the assets of the owner? Am I protecting the customers and employees? Am I protecting the financial resources of the organization? Am I using my time wisely? Am I using energy, products, buildings, equipment, information, procedures, and the brand? Okay, that just becomes an automatic filter that you run decisions through as we go, you know, deeper into management. This is super oversimplifying. I'm going to scroll up here. What you do is I put the last thing. That said, now you know. Now you know. Your job as a manager is to protect the assets of the owner, identify assets, and you can spend a lifetime now studying and honing your skills on how to make these simple concepts. Most things run on a simple concept. How to make these simple concepts work for you and the organization as we go through. Like I said, I can tell you how to do something. I can talk about how to do something basically for 15 or 20 minutes here, but then you spend the rest of your life really getting good at it. I've been in the hospitality business for close to 50 years, almost. And I still think about this. I think about whenever, especially a big decision, I'm like, on what basis am I making this decision? You don't make decisions based upon, like I said, what's good for my resume, what's going to make my day go better, go easier, go better. What's going to make me more popular, what's going to make me maybe achieve my quarterly bonus or something like that. You're not hired to fluff your resume or be popular or make your quarterly bonus or any of these things. You're hired to protect the assets of the owners as we go through. And I know that sounds harsh, but it's a harsh world out there. It's just to understand, to balance this out as well, is I have responsibility to the owners, and consequently the employees, for instance, are not my employees, they're the owner's employees. I don't care if you don't ever see the owner, if the employees have never even met the owners, or if you're talking about shareholders, you could have a lot of shareholders in an organization, and your responsibility is to the owners and shareholders, even if there's only one or if there's thousands of them. When you make decisions based upon what's good for them, not necessarily what's good for you on there. But happy customers are good for the organization. Happy employees and well cared for employees and employees that know what they're doing and feel supported and things like that. They're good for the organization. Taking care of all these other assets that go through is good for the organization on here. So again, this is something that kind of now on there. This is step one, the foundation to build a good manager off of, is making them understand what they do. I was told this very, very early in my career about making decisions based upon the organization, not on all these other things that once you start practicing this, you'll spot it as they come through, these things that are kind of like, oh, this, again, your resume, or I want to be popular, or I'm tired, and I just want to get through the day or something like that. That's not your job just to get through the day. Your job is to make decisions based upon the long-term best interest of the organization on there. If you want more information on this, of course, most of you watching this can just contact me, and we can talk more about it. But this is something that you always need to think about it. You get better at something by practicing. So that's the end of that. Thanks for coming today.